This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live first Mondays of every month on the USA EBN Network, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The Zeta Report is a partnership between USA EBN and Nancy from ZetaTalk.com, who I would like to welcome to the show once again. Welcome, Nancy.
Oh, hi there, Andre. I'm so pleased to be back. I would also like to add that in partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do next in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate, but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. Today we're going to talk about martial law versus national emergencies. What's the difference? People are very confused on this issue. They tend to leap immediately to we're being taken over, it's martial law, or another country is invaded, or the UN is taking over the U.S., or something, instead of dealing with the steps and stages, the way emergencies are handled today, what has historically happened, and examples around the world. Tim, who is our sponsor, would like to also mention that the USA EBN network is the only network that has been broadcast in other countries and as well as in the U.S. because of our research reporting on subjects like this. We sort out facts, not conspiracies. So speaking of conspiracies, I wanted to mention a couple to show you why I chose this subject, martial law versus national emergencies, what's the diff? There was something that happened on June 27th. It was raised to myself and the Zetas, and it was photos that were taken on a Virginia highway of a UN truck, UN SWAT trucks, painted white with UN in big black letters, driving down. They were being transported down a Virginia highway. Now, these were not being driven as in an invasion. They were being transported. Nevertheless, this video went absolutely viral. It was hitting all kinds of news, little websites. It was, people were buzzing about it. It was one of these, oh my, we're being invaded by the UN. Well, guess what? It didn't take me but about 10 minutes. Because somebody said they looked like Alpine Armoring Pitbull VX SWAT trucks. And sure enough, they are. They're Ford. They have a Ford base. They are armored by a company in Virginia, and then painted and getting ready for transport. And they export these. So we weren't being invaded by the UN. This was just Alpine's armoring, being put on a ship and sent somewhere. But this is how silly it can be. It was complete hysteria. Now here's another one. The FEMA trains, that are supposedly and I researched that once, but I still hear from people on email or whatever that, oh, it's absolutely sure there's 100,000 or, whatever boxcars out there with shackles and guillotines at the back of these boxcars, and they're going to kill us all.
Yeah.
It's apparently a FEMA contract. That's what the rumor goes. Well, and if you take a look at these videos and et cetera, what they're referring to, the miles and miles of these cars, oh, it's a really long train, and, they're for sure. Well, guess what? Those are car transport boxcars. They're manufactured for that purpose. You can find all kinds of pictures, from the manufacturers who show you how they load 3 tiers of cars. Oh, no, those windows, those 3 tiers of windows, those are for the poor shackled prisoners. No, they're not. They're to let light in so they can see what they're doing. It's like these car transports that go down the highway. Usually those are 2 high. These by rail are 3 high, very efficient, and it's complete garbage. And if you research the videos and the like, you find that they show pictures of guillotines, not at the back of a boxcar, but just the guillotine manufacturers are showing their wares, or they show pictures of shackles. Here's a shackle, and if you want to buy our product, it's so silly, So is FEMA waiting to behead half the nation? No. This is the kind of silly hysteria that can go on, and why we wanted to talk about the facts, historical, the way the U.S. works, what's going on today, and what FEMA is doing today, etc., to lend some logic. It goes in steps and stages. Nobody wants to institute martial law, which is difficult to maintain, expensive. You have to get all kinds of cooperation from people. Unless there's a real emergency, like half the nation is ripped apart by a big earthquake or something, you're not going to see it. And we'll get there in steps and stages.
Right.
Okay.
Can I mention something about the truck, Nancy?
Sure.
With the UN trucks, they're the white-colored, like it's a VHX, or I'm not sure the model number, but it is a Ford product, or a Ford base truck that is armored by another company in Virginia, and all those sightings and photos and videos of those trucks. Some of them with taped over UN on the door, where the stencil of UN is, with taped over with coverings, and people, they're trying to cover it up. Well, a big white SWAT van traveling through the United States is going to get some notice, whether or not you tape over the side of it, the name of it or not. Side note on that, the MRAPs and the major vehicles that are used in a lot of the urban warfare for the United States Army and other forces is actually manufactured in Oshkosh, Wisconsin by Oshkosh Truck Company. Those are the larger trucks, not the ones that the UN trucks are the SWAT vans. I'm talking about the big MRAPs. And you see those being moved across the nation a lot too. Well, they're manufactured, a lot of them are manufactured in Wisconsin, the bigger trucks, and then they have to ship them. We have water here, but it's not like we're on a coast. So they have to go somewhere. So there's a lot of stuff out there that's being used, I think, Nancy, as what they call clickbait. Before It's News is notorious for this, and every other website that has multiple ad layers on it just wants you to get shackles on a train. I'm like, they don't even prove it. Like you said, it's like that's a picture of a shackle from the catalog of the manufacturer of the shackle.
It, I guess,
Come on. But it gets people fired up, and it gets people to click on the web link, and then eventually they get ad revenue somehow, like 2.02 cents or something. But you do this multiple times, and you start getting people riled up over stuff that's, if you do a little research, is not even factually correct. Right.
That's right. Always be discerning and do your research, and assume if it doesn't feel right, you don't assume it's the truth. There's so much garbage out there. Okay, martial law. In the United States, there is so much confusion about the difference between martial law and calling up the National Guard, a national emergency, the purview of Homeland Security, and a situation where FEMA would become involved. In the U.S., there are laws to prevent the Department of Defense from operating within the country. If the military were to operate within the country to be in charge, it would be considered martial law, therefore the word martial. Where martial laws are in effect, that means it's military laws, military courts, military everything. So it's no small thing. Some countries, such as Thailand, regularly have martial law and return to civilian law, holding new elections. The military decides they need to take over, and they do so. This happened again in Thailand as recently as 2015. This was seen as benign, a rescue of the country from the clutches of corrupt politicians. The tourist business continued to thrive without disruption. Thailand does have a king who seems to be just a figurehead. It's so funny. I got pictures of the tourists, standing next to the military guys, and their trucks. And it was just another photo op for the tourists. So, and they do this periodically. Apparently, the politicians become corrupt, and then the military takes over, and then they get elections, and now they have new civilian, and it goes on like that. Anyway, that's an example. In the Ukraine, in 2014, the embattled government in Kiev declared martial law. This is the Russian-backed guy, the guy that left and ran from the city to Russia, apparently. And he was trying to declare martial law as a means of retaining control because there was a coup. And the current guy, who is backed by George Soros and other people in the West, not Russia, was installed. That move didn't work out, for the Russian-backed guy. I think his name was Yankovich. He fled the country to Russia. Per Alex Jones of InfoWar, this included mandatory community service. That was when he tried to declare martial law. This is part of what his declaration included, and I quote from Newsmax, Yankovich had moved to quell the growing insurgency, undertaken a nationwide anti-terrorism operation to restore public order and protect state borders. The move would give the military the right to search, detain, and even fire on Ukrainians in the course of the operation. That's an example of, and community service, Well, it was very brief. They had a coup. The guy got chased out of the country. But, historically, curfews, setting aside civil rights, and strong-arm tactics should be anticipated during martial law. Quoting Wikipedia, martial law is usually imposed on a temporary basis when the government or civilian authorities fail to function effectively. In other words, they fail to maintain order and security or provide essential services. Martial law can be used to suppress political opposition, as Poland did in 1981, or to stabilize insurrections or perceived insurrections, as Canada did during their October crisis of 1970. Martial law may be declared in cases of natural disaster. However, most countries use a different legal construct, such as a state of emergency, and that is true in the U.S. too. Okay, where is the line drawn in the U.S.? What does it mean when the U.S. military takes away the nuclear codes from a president, takes away the football, as it's called, as was rumored to have happened to George W. Bush during his NORTHCOM visit in 2005? It is also rumored presently that General Dunford is more in charge in Washington, D.C. than Obama. Bush appeared disheveled in 2005, wearing the same shirt for days after the NORTHCOM visit, while Obama just tangoed on. Remember when he went to Argentina? The rumor is that it was late September that Dunford stepped in because of the crisis in the Middle East and ISIS literally invading Europe, etc., and terrorism on the rise. Putin needed to send Russia in, which he did in late September. And that was the end of Jade Helm. We were supposed to have, per the Zetas, the announcement admitting that Nibiru is in our inner solar system, and Obama, per the Zetas, lacked courage, became spineless and didn't do it. So Dunford stepped in for a number of reasons. Let Putin go into the Middle East, and now look what's happening to ISIS. They're just getting wiped, and they're getting one city after another that they had taken over in 2014. We're taking them back, and not just the U.S., Russia, the Kurds, the French, the Syrian forces, everybody's in there, all the good guys, and it's quite a coalition, and Russia is leading, and it needed to be done. We weren't going to go back in, and Dunford saw to that. So this is a kind of like a silent coup, or a semi-martial law, or however what is it called? When George W. Bush had the football taken away in 2005, per rumors, did we get any kind of an announcement? No. We just saw his long face coming out of Northcom, where, according to the Zetas, they read him the Riot Act. Okay. Reconstruction. Way back when, Civil War. What is the Posse Comitatus law? It's a federal law which states that the U.S. military cannot be used for domestic purposes. Posse Comitatus has been federal law since 1878. That was at the end of the Civil War Reconstruction. It was done, essentially, to keep governors from setting up their own little countries. A lot of times we hear these days about Texas. We hear about the Brexit over there in Britain, and then we hear hints about the Texas. Maybe Texas will secede from the United States. They murmur a lot down there along those lines. Anyway, Posse Comitatus is to keep governors from saying they're going to confiscate any U.S. military in their state and use it as their personal military. Resentment in the South over losing the Civil War was lingering, and it was considered a threat to the Union. Quoting Wikipedia, in 1878, Congress passed the Posse Comitatus Act, which forbids military involvement in domestic law enforcement without congressional approval. The Coast Guard is exempt from this act. That's a very interesting exemption because my next comment is going to be Katrina. The normal progression is FEMA gets involved, the Homeland Security gets involved if there's a threat. FEMA is for disasters. And then we move up from there to a national emergency, which can be called, which means that you get a lot more attention from a lot of federal agencies. And then, if it's really bad, we would be declaring martial law, or maybe a portion of the nation would be under martial law, depending on what kind of disaster hit. Well, remember back in Katrina, we had FEMA that was failing. There was some guy that knew all about horse farms, and he was in charge of FEMA, and it was a disaster. You had little old ladies trapped in their roofs. They had all these people at the sports stadium. The garbage and the sewage was piling up. It was just out of control. And so here comes the Coast Guard. It was there was a lot of discussion about whether or not who asked for that, because the Louisiana governor said that she wanted the National Guard to be called up, which George Bush would have had to do, and he says he never got the phone call or whatever. So there was all this finger pointing, but in the meanwhile, here comes the Coast Guard, and it was wonderful. One of my favorite pictures is of General Honoré walking around with little children, stray children that he would pick up and carry around with him as he was directing his men to do this and do that. So calm, so reassuring. There was no sense of panic, and everything got set right in just a wink, and it was wonderful. FEMA, operating in conjunction with Homeland Security, had just failed there. So that's an example of the progression. When one arm is not enough, you move to the next, and add, but you don't leap to martial law, and you sure as heck don't leap to being invaded by the UN. Okay, national emergencies. The President, as part of the executive branch, has the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA under his direction. The President can also, via executive order, declare a national emergency, which is a limited affair. That is not martial law. That's just saying more federal attention. Quoting USA Today, a post-9/11 state of national emergency declared by President W. Bush and renewed 6 times by President Obama forms the legal basis for much of the war on terror. Since 1976, when Congress passed the National Emergencies Act, presidents have declared at least 53 states of emergency, 53 times, not counting disaster declarations for events such as tornadoes and floods. So it's a heck of a lot more than 53. In 2009, Obama declared a state of national emergency for the H1N1 swine flu pandemic, which was rampant in 46 states with a lack of vaccines, not enough vaccines to go around. That emergency, which quietly expired a year later, allowed for waivers of some Medicare and Medicaid regulations. For example, permitting hospitals to screen or treat an infection off-site, not in the hospital, but off-site, and to waive medical privacy laws. That's an example of how a national emergency it goes into effect and what it means. It's not even calling the National Guard. It might, but it's certainly not martial law, which means, the laws of the military apply. Okay. The Katrina executive order, another example of a national emergency order, was after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when President Bush declared a state of emergency, allowing him to waive federal wage laws. Contractors rebuilding after the hurricane would not have to abide by the Davis-Bacon Act, which requires workers to be paid the local prevailing wage. So it's very limited scope, these national emergency thingies. FEMA, working under the direction of Homeland Security, gets involved often for what might be called minor disasters. In 2016 alone, there were dozens of disasters requiring FEMA assistance, dozens, including fires in the Southwest, flooding in Texas, tornadoes through the heartland, and monstrous snowstorms on the East Coast. Bet you didn't know FEMA was involved with dozens of instances in 2016 alone. So, how do we jump then all the way to the worst of the worst, which is martial law and slave labor camps? You can imagine that's way down the line. I'll give you an instance. If you had flooding in Florida, you're not going to have a national emergency in the state of Washington. If you have a big earthquake in Memphis, you're not going to have a state of emergency in San Diego. So it's limited, and if martial law would ever be called in any of these instances, it would be because FEMA, Homeland Security, calling up the National Guard, writing executive orders, to smooth the way and make things possible isn't enough, and it would be limited. Okay, for Memphis. That's it. That kind of thing. Slave labor. Here we have the range of military or federal involvement during disasters. It can be so bad that martial law is declared in whatever country. Otherwise, starving and rioting and bloodshed are rampant. Now, I'm giving you a worst-case scenario. Let's say that there's a series of earthquakes, and it's so bad that everyone in a large cities, and our cities have millions of people, so do cities around the world, millions of people. There's no food. There's no food distribution. People have eaten the rats and the dogs. Now they've started to eat each other. What if cannibalism were going on in a city, and it was so bad you couldn't truck the people out because you can't get the trucks in? it's just what are you going to do? Stand by and let the babies go on the spit? I'm serious. This is a martial law instance. There would be, under martial law then, work camps. Pick up the hoe and go out into the field and get started. And if you don't, there's a gun at your head. And this type of thing, because the alternative is horrific. So this is an example. I'm leaping into something that someplace around the world can, and for the Zetas during the pole shift coming, could happen. So we're talking about, don't consider this to be, oh gosh, we're being invaded, or here come the soldiers, like General Honore and Katrina picking up that child and quietly giving orders, setting things right when the city was it was being looted. People were trapped in their homes, flooding, the sewage in the water. He said it right just overnight, it seemed to me. It felt like salve on a burn wound. It really did. Okay. So why would something like I described, a city trapped so that there's so many people, no food in, can't get everybody out, and maybe it's a wide devastation area, and you have to declare martial law to enforce labor, to whatever, build bridges or, get the corn harvested or whatever, why would that be so improbable? Guess what? Half of the world's population lives in cities, and more than half of these cities are along coastlines or inland where rivers will be flooded. Plus, when you have big quakes, everything falls down. The only reason this doesn't become a horrific issue is because we have limited quakes. Oh, this city got hit, but nowhere else in the world did. Everybody rushes in. But what if you have several cities getting hit, or the city and its surrounding area, that type of thing, plus a tidal wave hitting it? The kind of scenario that the Zetas talk about for the pole shift. By the way, don't be in cities. You should be in rural areas with chickens and goats and gardens well before, that kind of a situation arises. Take us seriously when we talk about self-sufficiency. The more industrialized a country is, the greater the concentration in the cities. The UK has 89% of its population living in cities, 89%. The US has 80%. Meanwhile, these cities are mostly on the coastlines, where big tidal waves can whoosh, there you go, knock over buildings, the sewage is in the water, the electricity is out, because everything short-circuited, like Hurricane Sandy did up there in New York City and in New Jersey. But take a look at Ethiopia and New Guinea. Ethiopia has 16% of its populace in cities. New Guinea, 13%. The less industrialized, the more they're out in the country, the more they know how to be self-sufficient in their growing food. So what would the U.S. do if the New Madrid ruptured at the same time that the San Andreas reacted with an adjustment? There goes Memphis, Chicago, Cleveland, and the cities running under the seaway. Charleston and Savannah, because there's an East Coast fault line that participates and runs up. And believe me, I was in Charleston and Savannah. Those buildings were damaged in 1811 during the New Madrid quake. Washington, D.C., there, it's right in line because it ends up in Boston, ringing the church bells in Boston. Now we go to the West Coast. Oh, L.A., San Diego, San Francisco, whoops, all the way up to Seattle, and aren't there a few volcanoes there? If the U.S. had a big adjustment, which is threatening if you watch the quakes, and the like, and all the signs, like the amount of electromagnetic pulse that is affecting small airplanes. In the first week of June, we had such an increase. I couldn't believe it. I found a map showing where small planes were affected. And boy, the eastern part of the United States was just covered with those incidents because we're under stress from the bow that the North American plate is forced to assume. This is beyond what I just described about all those cities getting hit simultaneously. This would likely be beyond what FEMA and Homeland Security and even a national emergency edict could solve. In places, there would have to, most likely, be martial law. And you would welcome it. Now, an example of how close our New Madrid may be. There was something that came up, a number of people who are in the FEMA Civilian Corps, which means retired military, people who are like medics and things like that. They're called the FEMA Civilian Corps. They were supposed to go for retraining in 2018, and they jumped it 2 years early to be by the end of June. I guess it's already behind us. And it was going to take place in Atlanta. Well, that's the FEMA Region 4. Guess what's in Atlanta? Atlanta is right in the middle of that whole area to be affected by the New Madrid adjustment. The New Madrid runs up the Mississippi, up towards Chicago, and then east. It goes down to Alabama, wraps around, and goes up the East Coast. And right in the middle of that whole big U is Atlanta. What do they know that we don't know? And what are these people supposed to say in the government? Are they supposed to say, we've been having a lot of EMP, a lot of blackouts, a lot of that kind of thing. We've been, having crevasses open up, gas and water mains popping, trains derailing and zigzagging and that kind of thing. So we know there's a lot of stress, and we think the big one is about to hit, other than having a few articles that appeared talking about what the New Madrid adjustment means, and referring, of course, back to 1811, trying to educate people. What are they supposed to say? Look, we think something's going to hit, but we're not sure when. There's no way we can warn you because earthquakes just kind of hit. But in the meantime, don't sleep in your houses. Sleep out in a tent. You can't say that to the entire East Coast of the United States or up and down the Mississippi. I mean, the government is kind of, their hands are tied. All they can do is get ready, and they can try to educate you, but I wanted to remind people there are ways you can tell that the ground is under stress. One is static interference with radio. And another is that pets get very anxious and clingy and want to run away from home, and so there are those signs that the rock is under a lot of stress. And why should that be? Because when the rock is being squeezed and stretched and crunched, the air pockets get squeezed out of the rock layers, and water gets in there, and water is an excellent conduit of electricity, so the electricity runs right through the rock instead of being blocked by insulators, in other words, blocked by air. And this is what the Zetas call the electronic screech of the rock, which makes pets want to flee and interferes with your radio reception. Okay. Urban gardens. Now, other than just sitting there fretting and worrying about when the UN is going to invade the U.S. or whatever silly thing, there's other things you can do with your time. Get ready. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Get into urban gardens. The public can be more self-sufficient. Don't just stock up and hoard. Learn to grow food. This is where you're going to be anyway. You can only stock up so much, and it's gone, and then what? So learn how to grow. Learn how to save seed. Growing veggies in containers on your porch. Get some soil. Get green compost with earthworms and grow soil. Save seed from your pumpkins and Indian corn that you're going to have this fall, that you've used for decoration. Save that because you're going to need that. And pumpkins are a winter, you can store them forever. Well, not forever, but for months. Full of vitamin A, full of calories. You can roast them. I guess you can eat them raw, but roast them. So, learn, and seed is all around you. And learn how to, and try growing things. It takes practice. Growing Power in Milwaukee is an excellent example. Just enter that into a search engine, and you'll get all the info because this guy does everything right. He has green compost and earthworms in there. He actually creates soil. These people are not only growing their own veggies, they're selling these veggies. He's a consultant, for various cities outside of Milwaukee. I think writes books. There must be some YouTubes out there. By the way, earthworms are 82% protein. And learn how to grow lysine-rich veggies. If you have amaranth and corn together and grind that up, you have the equivalent of red meat. It's lysine-rich, and then you don't even need the cow or the chicken or whatever. These are important veggies. Learn how to get your vitamins from bugs and weeds. This was a session that we had on USA EBN that I was very proud of because I was able to say with confidence, you don't have to have your oranges or whatever to get your B vitamins, your C, your A. Out there in the weeds and the bugs, you've got it all. Isn't that good news? Yeah. So, another is houseboats, one of my favorites. I must have lived on a houseboat in the past. They're so romantic. The water is rising. Everything is flooded. Find flotation devices, which, by the way, empty plastic bottles work just fine. Put them in a bag, tie them under your raft. Now you're floating. And you can move along. You can have a container of tomatoes on, you can go and fish. If you get away from all the pollution, get out there a little ways. Or if you're inland and in the hinterland, get free-ranging chickens, goats, a herd of goats. They make wonderful milk and wonderful cheese. Goats will follow you anywhere because you don't have to herd them. They consider the guy or gal, who takes care of them to be their leader, and they follow the herd master. And you can eat the goat, you can eat chickens, free-ranging chickens, run around, eat the bugs. Now you get eggs, you get meat. You should, by the way, goats eat anything. They will even eat poison ivy. They literally, the joke about there's the goat chewing on a can. I don't know if they go that far, but they're not hard to take care of. And I understand even their poop is very transportable. It's little pellets. You sweep it up, you distribute it in your garden. There you are, fertilizer. So you don't want to worry about slave labor camps because everybody in the city has become cannibals or they've become the meal. You want to avoid draconian government measures like that, then be part of the solution. Become self-sufficient. Learn how to feed yourself. So how are we doing on time, Andrea? We had a bunch of stuff that we were going to talk about.
We've got about 20 minutes left in the broadcast today, and I want to thank you for putting all that information together, especially with because there was a lot of stuff, especially on social media, late June, last 2 weeks of June, of those trucks, and then it just piles on, and then once one website carries it, it just goes off, and then people are reposting the same stuff that is still incorrect. You know how it goes on the, people will. That's why it's called click. It's called clickbait.
Yeah, it's
for
like
a reason.
the zombie thing. By the way, we're being invaded by zombies. There you'd be a little more discerning, but people sense that we're in for geological changes. They sense that, and subconsciously or because they're contactees and they're hearing this from the aliens on spaceships. That's one thing that you wanted to breeze through, Andre, is the number of contactees. So they know things are coming, and they're a little uneasy, and they're quick to grasp at that. Oh, gosh, here it comes. Just remember, if you have disasters, first FEMA gets called. If it's like terrorism or something like that, then Homeland Security gets involved. The National Guard might be called up. Now you get into some executive orders that make it easier for everybody to operate to get out of the emergency. And the very last thing that would happen would be some sort of martial law, and probably very limited in scope by region or time, So and then none of that includes the UN going to invade the United States. Ain't going to happen. Okay. Andre wanted to go over how many people are contactees.
Well, sort of the nature of my question, Nancy, was more like, over the past, I would say maybe a year, maybe it's just my noticing of it, of other people and what they're saying and asking questions about from, my circle of whatever. We talk about sometimes on the show the awakening, and whether that's an awakening to the ET presence or if that's awakening to a larger consciousness that we, like you said, we kind of sense that something's about to change. We sense the earth changing, and we're starting to follow the things in the sky in the spring and what have you. Is the awakening, I can't say that's complete, but more so, how are we doing? Are people gaining ground as far as, because there's people on the line between, kind of following the status quo and not really are here or there. They're just kind of keeping the blinders on. We call them uncommitted, I guess, souls.
Yeah, this is really a repeat question that comes up every once in a while. How many people are contactees? Because if you're a contactee, and the Zetas said, people become contactees because they, quote, give the call, which means you're really wondering about something, curiosity, or you're disturbed, or you sense something's amiss. Like maybe you see the sun come up in entirely the wrong place, and you say, what is that? You are in essence giving the call, and bebop, there's a little alien saying, this is according to the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas, this is, and of course, as being a contactee, I can vouch for this is the way it works.
Nice.
And then they'll talk to you, and they say, well, your question was this, and et cetera. So people who are contactees are getting their uneasy feelings addressed. They're being informed that Nibiru is in the solar system, which anybody who takes a serious look, at the sun or uses a filter or just, checks out the poleshiftning.com for all the we're getting daily pictures from webcams in Italy, and now we're getting them from Alaska too. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So they know that there's an exoplanet, I guess they're called, in the inner solar system, and that it's coming closer, and it's going to make a passage, and this is going to cause earthquakes and high tides along coastlines and the like, and so maybe there's an impetus for them to start gardening and do things like that, learn how to knit, how to twill yarn out of sheep, fur, wool, and that type of thing. Whatever their niche is going to be, they're trying to develop skills, learn how to work with wood tools and the like. So definitely being a contactee is going to help you get prepared, because you get an explanation for why there are earth changes and things that you're seeing that don't seem to fit, and you're getting suggestions on what you should do about it. And so people, but this is all in your subconscious, and there you are. You're like quietly carrying this around. According to the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas, when things start to unfold, these contactees are going to start acting on their silent plans, which is not a sinister thing at all. It's basically positive. They're laying plans. They're getting skill sets. They're getting prepared. They know what to do. And they don't panic. They say, okay, kids, grab that and grab this and get in the car. We're going to Grandpa Bob's, in the country. And pretty calm about it, because he knew he was going to be doing this. Daddy did. Okay, so in 2008, the Zeta said that there were 12,000 contactees. By 2012, they had bumped this to 1 billion people were contactees, because things were getting weird and people were given the call. Now we get into mid-2013, and there's really a bump, because they said fully half the population, which by that time was 7 billion people, fully half are contactees. So between 2012 and 2013, and maybe it was because of all the hype about 2012, the end of the world and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we went to 2015. another 2 years, and they said now we're up to 4.2 billion. And I think we're still around there because just recently they said over half the population, where that's over half, 3.5, 4.2 is over half. So that was a big jump of people. Now, how does that shake out? You know, the Zetas have earlier said, way back when, that the star children is about 1 billion star children. What does that mean? These are souls that evolved elsewhere. They came to the earth to participate in the transformation. Chances are that you know somebody who's a star child. You know, they don't walk around glowing or there's nothing weird. Supposedly Obama's a star child. You know, I'm certainly an awful lot of the people in Hollywood, like, you know, some of these producers and directors are. You know, the Star Wars producers that seem to know what aliens look like. Chances are they were one of those weird-looking aliens in their original incarnations. So 1 billion of our 7 are star children. Zetas broke it down, saying of the 7 billion, another billion are souls that sparked and evolved on Earth, Terran-born. I'm one of those. I'm not a star child. I'm really a very young soul. I only have 1,200 incarnations, so that's like nothing. You know, so of those 1 billion who were sparked on Earth, approximately 25% have evolved to become service to other, meaning practicing the golden rule and giving a darn about other people, others, you know, and willing to sacrifice your comfort for the comfort of more other people. About 7% are service to self, meaning they never did grow out of their babyish selfishness, centering on themselves, and they really just want to take care of themselves. They're grasping, greedy, manipulative, you know, backstabbing, whatever. And the remaining 68% are what they call undecided. They're not sure if they really want to be service to self or service to other. So they're still in that sorting out, which is what was the first thing that happens spiritually. Now, what about the other 4 billion or maybe 5, you know? Well, this is a Zeta talk explanation that people find shocking. They call those people unsparked, incarnated by unsparked souls. They have, when they die, there's not necessarily a soul that moves along and gets another incarnation because in order to be sparked, you have to have some kind of a challenge. Something happens where it becomes interesting for the stuff of souls, and they find this an interesting arena. If you lay around and you're lazy and it's kind of an indolent life, you know, you may not spark a soul. That human may not spark a soul. So what they're saying is this happens normally. Way back when we were cave people, you know, we had not every human or cave person or whatever sparked a soul. It's the exception rather than the norm. So there we have 1 billion star children, 1 billion. Now the thing about human bodies that don't necessarily have a sparked soul, they can get a sparked soul, and all the excitement of the pole shift may indeed set the stage for where sparking might occur. But you can have walk-ins with these humans. And this was apparently, per the opinion of the Zetas, this is their explanation, during the Arab Spring, you know, when so many people leapt up and said, we're not going to take these dictatorships anymore, etc. There was a lot of spirits that were currently not incarnated, not star children, but just spirits waiting to jump in, who said, I'm going to be a walk-in that body, and I'm going to make things happen. You know, so you can have a lot of and walk-ins are like the opposite of possession. Possession is a temporary a service to an evil, service to self-soul, but a walk-in is a good soul that comes in, you know, to do something important, something worthwhile and beneficial. So that's the percentages. And what does that mean for the awakening? It means that 4.2 billion humans are walking around that have with unconscious knowledge of what's coming. You know, because they're getting, and that's why one of the reasons that you have so many people, like in the United States, that are turning their back on establishment politics. They want Trump or they want Bernie Sanders. You know,
or
what
Brexit
happened to
too, you know?
Yeah, they're tired of, or over in Europe, the Brexit. You know, we don't want the UK to, and that all of that was supposedly a shock, you know, to the establishment, and they're saying, well, so you have, it's social change for the good, you know, indicating the common man wants more truth, more fairness, and no more of the old establishment anymore, because these people have had their eyes open on spaceships, and that's one way to put it. So one thing I wanted to touch on, and I think we have like 2 minutes. I'm going to rattle through it real quick. We've
got a little bit more time than that. We can expound a little bit more. Sure.
Okay. We have yet another site on Earth, webcams, that is regularly seeing Nibiru. There's been, as I mentioned, there's an Italy cam. There's also one in France. I think down in Antarctica, it's showed up a couple of times. There's some pretty good shots. The poleshiftning.com has those. But somebody sent me a video about Alaska, and I researched this. It took me a while to sort this out. I was very confused. There was Nibiru, there was the sun, there was Nibiru to the right of it, but it was, and then it was midnight, and on a cam that was essentially pointing dead north at 344 azimuth, really 360 is dead north. And then I realized what was going on. At that time, in that position in Alaska, Selawik, Alaska. It was a cam, a weather cam, available for people that fly airplanes to see what the weather was like, should they or should they not get their plane up that day. And it was looking across the North Pole over toward Europe. And at that time, at midnight, it was between midnight and 2 in the morning, the sun is just below the horizon. You can't see the sun. It is below the horizon. But if the world, because we have an Earth wobble, and the Earth wobble has gotten worse also. So the Earth wobbled over, so the North Pole went in the direction of Europe, and for 2 hours the sun rose and was visible and then went below the horizon, and then later in the morning, 6, 7 o'clock or whatever in the morning, it rose again because Alaska had moved around to be toward the east. Well, you know, we get the Inuit Indians that say, you know, we see this kind of thing and we're not supposed to, but now we do, you know, and everybody says, oh, Posh and Shaw, what do they know? Well, they know, because what else do they have to do but look at, you know, the stars and where the sun rises and sets. Okay, so there it was, yet another site with its shoulder pads. Nibiru is, you know, that's heavily shrouded orb that's kind of pinkish, and on either side it looks like football shoulder pads. That's its appearance when it came in 2003. That's its appearance in the Italy cam. That's its appearance down, you know, in Antarctica when it shows up on a cam there, etc., the shoulder pads. Okay. Now, where are we moving along with the prongs? So this was interesting about Alaska because it was a proof not only of Nibiru but of the wobble. Why are we? Yeah, there's the sun. Why is the sun ball up at midnight and then going down again? Okay. The prongs, we talked about the admission about Nibiru is in our solar system. And the Zeta said it was going to be a multi-pronged affair, and it was going to keep going until we were at the point where everybody said, there it is, next to the sun, and it arrived in 2003, just where and when Nancy and Zeta Talk said. And they said, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so first we had prong 1 that came about in late January, and it was talking about Planet 9 coming in from the direction of Orion. And they said, and of course this is the old theory about why they went out in 1983 and looked in that direction anyway, and then there was a big cover-up about, oh, never mind, we didn't find anything. Everything leans in that direction. So they said, oh, there's something out there, we've got it established. And this was a Caltech astronomer and other U.S. astronomers. And then they said, but now we have probes around Saturn that look like it might be out there near Cetus. Well, Cetus at the current time is a long way from Orion. It's over there where, if you look, at the 4 o'clock position of the sun, where people are seeing Nibiru. Okay, so Prong 1 was all about there's something way out there in space. That's the way they were putting it. That's tugging. It's a presence. It's a gravity thing. Okay. Then Prong 2 started, and they started talking about how the Hubble and the Kepler and WISE, the sky mapping services, are looking way out there, and they don't notice what's right at their feet. But look at the ESO and the little Chile observatory. They're not way out there. They just see things close in, and they found all kinds of little exoplanets, which are these free-ranging planets that don't seem to be going round and round a sun. They found a bunch of them in 2010, and, well, so apparently if it's close in, these big, expensive star mapping enterprises don't see them. Okay. Then we had something coming out. So now that was Chile, right? And the ESO is in a European observatory. So then we have something coming from Sweden, from an astronomer. Lund University says Planet 9 might have been captured by 2 different suns, our sun and another. So that's why it seems to be way out there. Well, of course, that's a Zeta Talk precept, and they said from the start in 1995, our sun is a binary. The sun's binary is dark unlit. It's out there in the direction of Orion, and Nibiru goes back and forth between. So they presented that concept. Sweden did, So we really got this far last month when we were touching on it at the USA EBN Zeta report. What happened now this month? Now, we have 2 Spanish astronomers talking about how there might be more than one exoplanet floating around at the outer reaches of our solar system, or maybe, in other words, many, not just Planet 9, but maybe there's multiples, and that's how come we had Cetus and Orion, and who knows, there might be and then there was something else. Oh, look, the Earth has a second moon. Well, actually, it's an asteroid that seems to orbit the Earth, and they just noticed it. Well, of course, they track all kinds of asteroids, but they just noticed that this particular asteroid is, in fact, going round and around the Earth like it's orbiting it, So we're getting closer and closer to say, we just noticed, there's so many exoplanets around, and, we just overlook because, Nibiru, when it came in, it's covered by red dust. Mostly when you look toward the sun, it's a dim fuzzball. If the sunlight doesn't bounce off the dust cloud just right, so that you think there's 2 suns rising or setting, you don't see it. It's lost in the glare of the sun and the like. So they're getting ready to admit that Nibiru's in our inner solar system, yada, yada, yada. And won't that be grand? Because then people can get really serious about urban gardens, chickens, goats, getting vitamins from weeds and bugs and stuff like that. Okay. So
all right.
That's it for me.
Okay. I want to say also, Nancy, it's like we have been talking about this. ZetaTalk.com has been on since 1995, but the Zeta report specifically on USA EBN has been consistent for every month for almost a year and a half now. And what I wanted to say, too, is that, there's other countries that are dealing with this in a much different way, and I don't, want to say there's a cover-up all over the Earth about this approaching planetary system, but, and then you look at, like, RT or Russia, not propaganda, but the Russian news agencies, which are, owned by the government primarily, but still, they talk about it. I mean, they've been talking about it for like 10 years, I think. It's like I've seen some, infomercials about it, and they're moving people to the east and to get away from the earth changes that are going to happen in the western part of the state. It's like, you know what, we can do this here, and we're trying to do that. Just help people get ready and get away from the cities and get away from the coastlines. And if a volcano's in your neighborhood, probably not a good spot. And the same thing for nuclear power plants. And if it's a low-lying area, it's probably going to get flooded. If it's flooded in the past 10 years or 20 years, it's probably going to be, 5-6 times as worse. So just get ready for it. That's what we're trying to tell everybody.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about self-sufficiency and in particulars. In great detail. We just don't say garden. We just don't say that. I mean, we go into particulars, So, and this is a wealth of an archive, I want to say. And on my website, when you go in and you look, right away on the left-hand side in the drop-down, New Zeta Talk and interviews, there's the list going back, as Andre said, a year and a half. And be sure to visit that and revisit. And I know that USAEBN has that on their website also, but I know mine, and I know how readily available it is.
Right. And also what we do, too, is, Nancy, through the question and answer portion of the Zeta Talk process, we put together this show, and we'll also have photos that coincide with the kind of the collage photos as well as graphs and things of that nature, diagrams, that will coincide with what we're talking about. And those are all getting posted on the YouTube version, which is the audio version with those video or with those images. And that goes on the Zeta Report on YouTube, which you can find at the Nancy Leader channel. And again, you can also find it at zetatalk.com under interviews. So we try to make it as available as possible. And again, we're doing this for, the benefit of people that have more questions about it and don't want to go to the Alex Jones website or Before It's News because they get bounced around and confused. And we're not preaching fear, we're preaching hope. And, it all comes down to what you can do for your family, because don't depend on the government or the county or somebody else to come and save you. It's going to be up to you. I mean, they'll be around, but they're going to be like when you're talking about 5, 6, 10 major cities having problems at the same time, people are going to be spread thin. And after 2, 3, 4 weeks of that, and that's just the start of the pole shift and the aftertime, it's going to be tough. So it's better to be ready before something happens than it is. Well, I mean, that's kind of the definition of being ready, isn't it, Nancy? But yeah, it's about preparedness and readiness and self-sufficiency and knowing what's going on and how to take care of one another. And, don't believe the hype. Do some research. Drill down,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
and really, it is possible to survive. Your diet is going to be a little more limited, but it'll be just as healthy, and you'll be in better shape. You'll get exercise. You'll get rid of your fat. You'll get rid of your diabetes and your heart disease, and there'll be a lot more social interaction. The kids' school will be out. Kids hate sitting at their desk and memorizing stuff, because they can work with their parents. They can work with each other. It'd be like one big party. Believe me, there's pluses in this situation that people don't think about. Don't forget, when you get a pumpkin, save that seed, because pumpkins last.
Yep.
Yeah, and Indian corn. It's don't throw it out. I'm just astonished. And it's wonderful. You can. That's the first thing I'd say here in Wisconsin to farmers who say, "Well, I'm out of gas. I can't run my tractor. Now what? How can I plow the field? I don't have seed corn." Well, guess what? Somebody saved a bunch of pumpkin seeds. You go and plant those in the field. They don't have to have. They have these big leaves. They catch the sun, and you can eat the leaves and eat the pumpkins. And now everybody. Well, it can be kind of a boring diet, but I gotta tell you, you'll be healthy.
So do a little research, do a little work, and ditch the fear, because you're going to turn that fear into productive behavior. Building knowledge and getting ready. And like you said before, it's like you can't.
And you're
store
likely
all the
to
food.
You're likely to be the hero. You're likely to be the hero for the group you're in. Yep. Okay.
Get ready. Thanks a lot, Nancy. Again, great show.